we know from the science that our brains, when they're stressed out, when they're overwhelmed, even if it's all these businesses and it's not even actual time going into it, we know that you're going to default to what you already know. That doing new behaviors is harder when you're stressed out.
Boom, 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 boom.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Hustle Flowchart podcast with your boys, Matt Wolf and Joe Fier. Check it.
Hello, friend.
Hey.
And friend listening. How are y'all?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm waiting on a response from you. All right.
They're good.
That was good. Cool. I felt it. I felt it through the airwaves somehow. Airwaves.
Yeah.
We're on radio again. Maybe we are. All right. So today.
There's no airwaves going on right now.
No, I don't think so. So we're chatting with a second round that this guy's been on.
First round for you.
That's true.
Yeah,
on our podcast at least.
Yes. Joe ditched. Joe flat out ditched the last time we interviewed him.
For a good reason. You'll hear why in a minute. All right. But I think you got my back on this. I was okay. But that was the only episode I've never been on.
His reasons were iffy.
Iffy. He's always away. I know. All right. So Joe Sanok, he has this is the round 2 he's been on. First round, he was with you.
Yep.
And chatting all about how he's grown his podcast like to ridiculous numbers.
Oh, dude, it was
multiple
a very,
podcasts.
very systematic, tactical episode about like building a podcast and mapping out what content's going to go on the podcast. Excellent episode. Highly recommended. Totally different than what we talked about on this one.
Completely different, but it's great because it's kind of this, you can see the evolution and it builds on what some of the stories Joe talks about. But his podcast, for instance, like Practice of the Practice is his biggest one, I think, the main one. But that one, I mean, he's been hitting in the top 50 podcasts worldwide, over 100,000 downloads every single month. I mean, dude's doing it right. So definitely go back to that previous episode, get the notes out, whatever. Check them out if you already have them. This episode that we're talking about, basically, well, he has a new book coming out, but all the concepts around what this book stands for. His book is called Thursday is the New Friday: How to Work Fewer Hours, Make More Money, and Spend Time Doing What You Want.
Yeah, so that subtitle right there is pretty much the conversation we have in this episode.
Yep. Yeah, so that is being released. It's not released yet at the time of this drop, but October 5th.
Yes.
So you can pre-order it, go to his website, go to Amazon, joesanok.com, you can go find it there as well.
And it's spelled Sanok.
That's correct. And what else? I mean, we talk about all the cool stuff he's doing, but Joe's just a super down-to-earth guy. We connected with him back at Steve Olsher's event, about 4 years ago, whatever,
like
4 years ago. And just hit it off ever since. He does some cool stuff with sponsorships too. I remember that's what we were hitting off back in the day. So
yeah, I think some of that might be in the last episode that we did with him.
I think so.
Yeah.
So if any of this also piques your interest, of course you have Pod Hacker, and we'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw that out there. It's like, maybe we'll bring him into that program as an expert one of these days too, if he's open for it. But
that would be cool.
But let's talk about the action guides they can also get.
Yeah,
as part of this.
Stick around to the end of the episode because I did ask him how he got published on HarperCollins, and he literally broke down the whole story. So if that's something you're interested in, is getting published by a traditional publisher, he basically gave a roadmap. So make sure you hang out to the end. But yes, if you go to flowchartgroup.com, you can join our Facebook group, and we'll also hook you up with the action guide to this episode. And you're going to want that. So flowchartgroup.com.
Group.com. All righty. And I think we have a beautiful sponsor that would like to be talked about right now.
Yeah, well, let's go talk about it.
Yo.
Hey.
Hi. You're here. I think I would like some more organic traffic for our website.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah? I mean, we have a lot of traffic. Do you think we want more, or do you think everyone else would deserve or would like more for their websites as well?
Can we do it for free?
Is this a rhetorical question? Yes, it's a rhetorical question. Dang, right?
Yeah, well, I want to know if I can do it for free.
Well, you can now. Why is that, Mr. Matt?
Because if you go over to ahrefs.com/AWT, they have a new cool tool. Well, it's a cool tool.
Cool tool, yeah.
Called Ahrefs Webmaster Tools, and it's over at ahrefs.com/AWT, and it does a lot of the same stuff that the full-fledged Ahrefs does, but it's a free version.
So they basically made this tool, Webmaster Tools. It's ahrefs.com/AWT. It's going to monitor your SEO health of your website, so you can make sure, hey, are there any issues I should be looking at? And it basically scans your site. There's like over 100 typical SEO issues that would like flag Google and all the search engines. Well, it's going to tell you what's wrong with your site, so you know exactly, and actually the advice on how to fix those things. That's pretty dang important. SEO still is our number one new traffic driver for our websites. Really, that's across all of our websites. That's how people discover us. So you might as well have a little finger on the pulse of the health of your website and the SEO. It also does backlink monitoring, all these other search traffic terms and things. It's free though.
It's free, yeah. Monitor your SEO health, backlinks, and keywords for free over at hrefs.com/AWT. That rhymed. And we're back. Let's go talk to Joe Sanok now.
Let's do it. Mr. Joe, how are you? Good to have you
I'm
back.
doing awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this show. I'm so glad to be back on it.
Yeah, this is I mean, the first time Joe Fier didn't get to interview you, he had more important things to do,
like just having a baby.
Yes, yeah, big deal, right? Podcast baby. That would have been interesting from the room, but no.
Yeah. I just show up to the hospital with the equipment. Hey, the show must go on, Joe.
Always. But I heard the show, the episode. It was the only one I missed, and it was an okay episode. Not because of you, Joe.
Yeah.
No, I definitely carried the episode. I definitely carrying it.
You were the fill-in Joe. And it was great.
It's true. I don't know how to do this alone.
Well, we're going to make up for that episode with this one. And we're talking about something completely different. I mean, that was all about podcasting, which you are a total rock star in Practice of the Practice. And you have another one as well, I believe, right?
Yeah, Podcast Launch School.
That's
it. And then, now we have Thursday is the new Friday.
Oh, that's a new podcast.
That's a show too?
Well, it's probably by the time this airs, we'll have a short form show, just kind of around the book, like extra enhancements beyond it. So, yeah.
Very cool. Sweet. So, the new book is coming out in what you said, October, right?
October 5th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thursday is the new Friday. And it's basically Pat Flynn, JLD, all these guys talking about it. But what Pat Flynn called it the new 4-hour work week. It's kind of a big deal, I'd say.
Seriously, like I expected to go read this book, and but to have Pat Flynn, who I've looked up to forever,
for sure,
call it the new 4-hour work week was like, oh my gosh, like thank you, Pat, that's insane.
Well, I know he started online around the time that book came out, because that was roughly around when we're all starting to dabble with online marketing, podcasting. How about yourself? Like, when did you get into this space? Like, was that a big book for you, 4-hour work week?
It was, in 2009, I started my counseling private practice and just was learning a bunch of kind of business things that I never learned in college. Mm-hmm. So I started listening to a lot of those guys and reading a bunch of books like Guerrilla Marketing and 4-Hour Work Week. And then in 2012 is when I launched Practice of the Practice, that podcast and website, just as a side gig to hopefully pay off some student loan debt. And then eventually got to leave my full-time job to go podcast and counsel people.
Well, it's done all right. Yeah. No, I know
it's done all right. Yeah.
You've grown that thing ridiculous, man. Like it just, you're doing something like 100,000 downloads a month, I think it is, on that show. I mean, it's so cool. It's just, because we have a lot of podcasters listening, of course. So, I mean, it's a very niche type show, but I mean, check it out. The results are showing for themselves there. And you're getting featured all over the place for it too. So,
well, and I think that it also shows how when you really niche in, like you don't even need to have that big of an audience to be successful, because I was teaching counselors and private practitioners how to start, grow, and scale a private practice. And, they're making between $100 and $300 an hour. So if I can teach them how to make more of that, I can charge, 2 to 3 times that hourly rate. So very quickly, $900 an hour is easy to charge. Whereas if you're just teaching general business, like it's hard to justify that. So you're going to have such a smaller audience when you have that specialty. And then like all my work was around counselors and private practice. And so I outpaced any of the other business people because I knew my market. And for a while I wanted to jump and be the next Pat Flynn and do general business, which, a lot of the book that I wrote this time is, but, really to say, how do you actually make money at this stuff? It's, when you're actually doing something that's that niched in, it's a lot easier to just focus in on your audience and create products that they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a specific need, some solution that you can give to them and roll from there. And it's like, hey, referral, word of mouth.
Yeah. So last time we chatted, it was prior to this, epic road trip that you guys did. Fill in some of the details from the last time we got to we talked, which probably a year and a half ago now is when that last episode came out.
There was a global pandemic.
Yeah, it was part of that. Yeah, well then in that case it was more than a year and a half ago, wasn't it? Because it wasn't in 2020 that we talked. It must have been.
Well, my daughter was born Halloween of 2019.
So that was.
So there you go.
Yeah, so it was pre-pandemic. Yeah, so maybe that was a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway,
Similar,
the question is, let's fill in the details. Like, where did this road trip come from, and what did you guys do, and how did you even feel comfortable going on a road trip in the first place? When most entrepreneurs listening, going, I don't know how I'm going to get away from my computer for 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, for one, I was already location independent before the pandemic. I had sold my counseling private practice in 2019, was testing out working from home, didn't have an office to go to on purpose to just see if I could turn my home office into a studio, get all the right soundproofing, all that. So already I was kind of paring down how I was working, and I was down to 2 days a week at that point. And then, when we went on the road, it was really, how do I push this even more? So could I do 4 days a month of really intense work? And then, of course, I'm going to fill in the gaps here and there with some email. And so the getting away from the desk thing, that was never going to be a problem. It was just making sure I had internet in the middle of national parks, which was its own side conversation we can go down if we want to. But we'll just say I had 5 backups for my internet, which was crazy expensive. But there's only a couple times I had to reschedule due to internet, and figured out that basically if you're in a national park, you're not going to get, even the best satellite internet isn't going to pick up anything there. So, so starting with that, it really was the idea that Zoom school for our kids was probably not going to be as educational as being on the road. And this was something that I had thought through for a while, even before the pandemic, of going on the road. So when the pandemic hit, it actually was a bummer because all these people bought RVs when we thought it was going to be like RV sale time where we could negotiate. And, the people that we tried to negotiate with just basically laughed at us. They're like, you have one of 3 versions of this RV. We know we can sell it 10 minutes after we talk to you. So do you want it or not? And so we bought it from California and had them bring it all the way to Michigan for us to only drive back to California.
Wow.
But from September 2020 until late April 2021, I was on the road with my 2 daughters and their mom. And just, with the idea that it's a lot better to just give kids experiences than just sitting around. Nothing against Zoom school. It's definitely a place of privilege that we got to do this, but kind of put together our own road schooling curriculum where our oldest kid, Lucia, she had this online tutoring program, and then this other thing called Beast Academy, which is math.
My kids
and then
do that.
throughout the
Nice.
and then everything else really was national parks have some great junior ranger programs and really letting them follow their curiosity. And then we had a weekly podcast called Leave to Find that we also documented the entire thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Mostly it was Lucia and I, because Lakin, our 6-year-old, just didn't ever want to talk. She would just sit and eat snacks while we were podcasting. And that became like the joke. Like Lakin just got hungry as we're about to podcast yet again, like, get your own food, kid. And
more Cheez-Its on the microphone. Crunch.
Seriously, it's like Goldfish should have been a sponsor of ours. But then to see even Lucia, who was 9 at the time, she's 10 now, go from being kind of nervous with a microphone to being an amazing storyteller and having animation and just these things that, man, when you see a kid be able to communicate, like, that's going to help them be successful so much more than just being able to do a math problem. And that sense of awe and appreciation for our country and just like having experiences that are just totally crazy. It was an amazing learning experience for all of us.
What was the where was the standout spot for you? Was there a national park or something obscure along the way?
There were so many things for me that just were so different from each other. I think that to see Lucia and Lakin have their favorite spots was so exciting. So we went to Meteor Crater in northern Arizona. And Lucia is really into space right now. And so for her to go through the experience of learning about this meteor and what they are and being able to correct people when they say comet or meteor, like, she knows all these differences. Yeah. Also seeing her in Carlsbad Caverns in southern New Mexico, she really likes caves right now. And she's just an expert in caves for her age.
Spelunking.
And then spelunking. Yeah. And she can still name all the different types of formations inside the caves. Sweet. So that was incredible to see. And then with Lakin, she has always kind of been a rock hound. She's been interested in rocks. She's really kind of like a mindful little kid, like our little guru. And we were at Petrified Forest, and I swear she could have sat there and just stared at these rocks for days. And I felt bad having her leave because she would just be so observant. And like she was tripping on LSD or something, just
looking at a rock. Yeah.
There was actually a research study that looked at kids' brains compared to someone on LSD, and they found that under the age of 5, that kids' brains are closer to someone on LSD than as an adult brain, because they're just taking all the awareness in. So,
dude, my 1.5-year-old is is like that. Like she not predicted, but she was talking about her great grandma the other day. It was like a minute before her great grandma called. I was like, this has happened a lot. Like there's something going on with kids. Like they're tapped in on a different wavelength. But
I agree.
Yeah, we got to get back to it. But yeah, us adults. You have to find other mechanisms sometimes, or ways of thinking.
We just got to take LSD. What can I say?
Oh yeah,
There you go.
I've not done that.
Neither have I, but similar stuff.
Well, let's. I'm kind of curious about like the transition from your practice because I think you're working like 60 plus hours a week, right? Like, so you went from like crazy time to and location dependent to then not, obviously with the RV trip and before that, and obviously your book Thursday is a New Friday. Like you basically have a whole different schedule that you present people, but even for yourself, I'm sure it's like radically different than just like a few years ago, right?
Yeah. So in 2014, when I was working at the community college, I had a 40-hour work week with the community college, my side private practice, and my podcasting consulting. So that's when it was for sure the busiest. But then I took the Full Family Medical Leave Act into 2015 when my youngest was born to just see if I could work less, to work 20 hours a week through the college to pay for health insurance and then do the private practice. But then I ended up leaving that job, did just the private practice. And when that happened, I said, like, what schedule do I want? Yeah. Then I ran the numbers to see like what would I actually have to do in regards to clients, in regards to consulting. And then in the first month hit those numbers. And I was only working 3 days a week at that point. So I right away said, let's step back and, just work 3 or 4 days a week. Always take Fridays off. Did an experiment around that the first summer. It was great. And so kept taking Fridays off and then quickly moved to, well, let's do an experiment on if I took Mondays off too. And the numbers just kept climbing, even though I was working so many fewer hours. And so kind of over the time, I just continued to work only those 3 days a week, even though I had the private practice, but I kept adding clinicians so that our income kept going up. And so we got up to 11 clinicians that were seeing, caseloads to be able to have that passive income that wasn't based on my own time. But then when I sold the practice in 2019, again, it was sort of a, what do I want to do? And I said, well, in the past, I just kind of kept shaving things off. And I said, if I want this book deal eventually, I need to make sure I have a day dedicated to really creativity. So I switched to working Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday became my big work day. And so for a good year before I even started sending out the book proposal, I was working with a writing coach, and every Thursday we would meet and we'd have a good 2-hour session together. I'd have to write and do all these things, and then she'd write, and then eventually we had this 20-page proposal to submit to HarperCollins and other places. So then Thursday just stayed my writing day until the book was done right before the road trip. And so I was in that habit. But then when I was done writing it, I said, well, should I replace that time or should I just not work it? So then paired off Thursday as well. So it was then Tuesday and Wednesday, and then as we were in national parks, kind of paired it down more and more. Yeah.
No, I love it, man. And what you're saying is exactly what Matt and I have been doing. Kind of exactly. We take Wednesdays off. So I'm kind of curious of like, obviously Friday, it seems like probably the easier day you can take off with schedules and all that. But is there any reason Friday over like another day of the week?
Yeah, I would say it's more of a metaphor for taking an extra day off if we really go macro. But if you really look at like the historical just side of how we even got our weeks, it's pretty crazy. The Babylonians, several thousand years ago, they made up the 7-day week. It was completely random. It was because they could see the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. And those were like the brightest things that they saw. So they said 7 days. The Egyptians had a 10-day week. The Romans had an 8-day week. So that's made up. In nature, a year makes sense because we go around the sun. A day makes sense because that's what it takes to rotate. But there's nothing in nature that's 7 days, like that it has to be 7 days. So it could just as easily have been a 5-day week, and we had 73 of those weeks. So starting with that, and then kind of moving into people in the late 1800s, early 1900s were working 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. So then when Henry Ford brings the 40-hour work week, that's a huge step in the evolution of business. And so we then start to see in the 80s, I don't know if you guys remember ABC's TGIF with Full House and all that. I mean, by that point, Fridays really were moving into being more like the weekend, even if people were going to work and showing up. I mean, it's when you had birthday parties. It's when you had baby showers. You might do a visioning retreat where you have to do a trust fall into your like coworker's arms.
We all wear blue jeans to work today.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to wear blue jeans, Jean Friday. So to me, I mean, Friday has already kind of moved into the weekend. It's when people are planning their weekend, they're texting their friends, they're on social media. So it's a half-worked day anyway. And so why not just move it into the category of weekend instead of just keeping it there?
Yeah, I like it, man. Because for us, we've been doing this for maybe a few months now. 4 months or so, this whole Wednesday off thing.
Yeah. It's been, I would say maybe 2 months that we've been doing it consistently. Before that, we were saying we were doing it, but stuff would still creep in every Wednesday, and we'd still be doing quite a bit.
Well, we did. I mean, we had to time. We chose to time block, obviously, like for as far as possible.
Yeah. But what I like about Wednesday specifically, just speaking for us, is it actually feels like we have 2 Fridays a week, right? We come in, we work on Monday, Tuesday. At the end of the day on Tuesday, we're kind of like, it feels like a Friday. We're hanging out going, well, what are you going to do tomorrow? Are you going to the zoo, going to the beach? What's your plans for the weekend, right? That's our Tuesdays, and that's also now our Friday. It's also our Fridays, right? So it feels like we're working 2 days, and then we have you kind of have that weekend to look forward to on Wednesday. Then you're working 2 days, and you have that weekend to look forward to after Friday. Yeah. And that sort of flow, I think, mentally was really, really beneficial. It just kind of always feels like, I just got to sprint for 2 days, and then I'm out. And then I just got to sprint for 2 days and I'm out, No,
that's awesome. I did Wednesdays for a little bit too. I tested that out, and same sort of thing where you feel like you have those 2 Fridays. And I mean, I think you guys tapped into it where you have to set those very hard boundaries around it because things will creep in. There's always more that we can do. But Matt, you really touched on it where we're going to the beach tomorrow. We're going to the zoo tomorrow. It's when you schedule the fun things in and say, I am taking, so for example, every Wednesday night I have improv. I'm part of an improv troupe. I have to show up for it. It's a non-negotiable. My parents have said we will watch the kids any Wednesday night. When you have that thing, you're going to show up for it. Whereas if you leave it open, it's like, well, I could check a little bit more email. I could do a little bit more. I could do an extra podcast episode. Yeah. So I think it's awesome that you're scheduling things into your days off to like make yourself go to the zoo or to the beach.
No, it's fun first. Yeah. Schedule the fun first. And, we've had so many different people tell us that's like such a better strategy than scheduling the big rocks of work first. It's like flip that paradigm and then you start to realize how much time you actually do have for yourself. So kind of curious of like maybe the mechanisms that you choose when you're, walking people through in the book. I think you have some quizzes, assessments and stuff like that to kind of customize it, but how would someone approach it through, going through your thought process here from like a loaded work week to that?
Yeah. One thing that you're kind of touching on is what in the book I talk about, which are sprint types. And so we often hear, go do a 20-minute sprint, or this is the one way you're supposed to time block, or,
yeah.
But the thing is the research actually shows that there's kind of 2 different axes of how people sprint best. And so say someone tries one of the 20-minute sprints and they're like, that didn't work for me. It's like, it's not that the sprinting didn't work for you. It's that you don't know your sprint type. And so if we start with, are you more of a time block sprinter or are you more of a task switch sprinter? So a time block sprinter is a person that we might call them someone that batches. So you guys are going to do 4 or 5 podcast interviews, and it's all podcast interviews, all in, an afternoon. So that's a time block where it's all the same task. Whereas task switch sprinters need the variety. So they're still sprinting, but they're going to do, say, a 20-minute sprint. I'm going to just like tear through my emails, and then I'm going to outline this solo podcast. And then I'm going to spend 20 minutes, doing some consulting calls. So they're switching. They need that variety in their brain. And so different people have different ways that they do that. But we often hear, okay, you're supposed to just like time block for the whole afternoon and just do that one thing. Well, that's not always true with everyone's brains. So that's one way of thinking about it. And then if we think about it as an XY axis, so the other side of it would be, are you more of an automated sprinter? Or are you more of an intensive sprinter? So an automated sprinter is someone that they put something in their calendar and it repeats. So for me, that was every Thursday, I'm working on the book. I'm an automated sprinter. Every Thursday, boom, it's going to do that. And that just repeated in my calendar. Nothing could get scheduled because that was just a writing day. Whereas people that are intensive sprinters are people like Dr. Jeremy Sharp, who I talk about in the book. He has the Testing Psychologist podcast. He has this really big practice in Fort Collins, Colorado. And he goes away for a long weekend to just tear through things. But he thinks through it really strategically. He finds an Airbnb that is within walking distance to a coffee shop and a vegan restaurant because he's vegan. He makes sure there's a backyard because he wants to be inside and outside. He wants to have hopefully a hot tub or something like that to decompress. So he has all these kind of checklist things he goes through to find the perfect Airbnb. And then he goes away for 3 or 4 days and just absolutely kills it. That for me, I don't do as well with that as having shorter sprints that's just routinely every week. So, but he knows who he is. So he gets way more done in those 4 days compared to if I went away on a retreat for 4 days. So I think when people really think about their sprint types, it takes that relief off. Like, you're not doing it wrong. You just didn't figure out your sprint type.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I've never thought about it in that way. So how does someone figure out who they are? Like, are there a couple questions or things they can think about?
Yeah. So in the book, I walk people through kind of how to assess themselves for their sprint types. But I think, even without buying the book, to just start to test it out. So maybe put in your calendar on a certain day for an hour that it's just going to repeat every Thursday or Monday or whenever you're best. You got to write blogs or whatever your thing is that you're working on. And then also schedule some time to go away for a weekend and just compare the two. Do an A/B test between, is it more automated or is it more, I need to go away for an intensive? And there's going to be different periods of life when that shifts for you. So, when I was on the road, it was really hard for me to get away for 4 hours to go work on one thing. Or if it rained on one of the days and I was going to podcast outside and then it's raining and I'm in the camper and it's like making all this noise, I'm not going to podcast. And so we also have, or if we have a new baby, there's going to be things that change your sprint types, but you still have your natural preference that you have.
Yeah.
Now, how much? So from like your book, how much like automation plays into this the stuff that you teach? Because I feel like the reason we're able to do what we do now, the reason we're able to take Wednesdays off and on the 2 days a week, well, the two-day weeks that we currently work, we have just like a handful of things that we do, but for the most part we've got team members, we've got automations, we've got systems. So like we've basically pared down to like these are the only 4 things we need to focus on because everything else has happened through automations or team members. How much of that plays into what you're talking about and taking Fridays off and paring down your work week?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big things that the research supports is that when you give yourself less time to do something, you get it done still. So Parkinson's law, work fills to the time that's given for it.
Right.
So when we look at that, when we think about it, okay, so the average entrepreneur is wearing all these hats, they're stressed out all the time. And they say, you know what, I'm going to cut out Fridays. I'm going to cut out 20% of my week. What do you do with that other 80% if you have all this stuff that needs to be done? Well, you do your best stuff. You're not going to dink around on email if you know that you can land a client that's going to pay you $1,200 a month on, for half an hour of your time. And so even if you think about, okay, usually it takes me an hour to clean the kitchen. I'm going to spend 20 minutes cleaning the kitchen. You're probably not going to just clean in the corner and the cracks unless that really pisses you off. You're going to get the dishes done. You're going to put the dishes away. You're going to wipe the counters. It's going to look relatively clean in that 20 minutes. Now, if you always do that at a certain point, your kitchen probably needs a deep clean. So maybe one of those sprints, you need a deep clean. But we naturally work on the highest level of things first when we don't give ourselves enough time. And so by giving yourself less time, you're naturally going to start dropping the ball. We talk through kind of what you can do when you drop the ball. You're going to ask yourself, like, should I even be doing this thing? Like, can I just totally get rid of it? Maybe it was like a double task that like, why are we filling our time with this? The other side of Parkinson's law was he noticed, especially in the military, that how bloated budgets and systems started getting over time. And so a lot of what we do is double effort. It's things that we thought were automations, but actually it's just like a ton of red tape we've created for ourselves. So it could just be you get rid of it. It could be that you really shouldn't be the one that's still designing every single podcast work of art. And you could pay someone $15 an hour to do something that super high level people are not doing, you shouldn't be doing. And so it could be that you outsource it. It could be that there's some software as a service that can do it. So all the processes help after you've dropped the ball, because that really reveals like, man, I should not be checking my email. I missed this email from someone. If I just had someone going through my email on a regular basis, that would help me catch these really important emails.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's a conversation Joe and I have actually been having quite recently too, because we sort of would beat ourselves up on some of the stuff that we dropped the ball on. But most of the time, when you really look at it, the stuff you dropped the ball on is the stuff that you kind of intuitively realize is probably the least important stuff. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have dropped the ball on it, right? And so there's a little bit of a element of giving yourself grace, right? And just and kind of going, look, let yourself drop the ball on a few things. If it becomes an issue, then figure out how to shore up that issue so you don't drop the ball anymore. But in most cases, the stuff you're dropping the ball on is probably the least important stuff. If you're looking at the 80-20, that's probably the 80% that's, producing the 20% of results for you. So maybe it's not necessary.
Yeah. Well, that's what you just said is relates right here is how we've kind of shifted our thinking from time spent on something to what's the actual action that we're choosing to do right now in our business. And we had to do a hard look. We chose to do a hard look, did the 80-20, maybe even a 90-10 on a lot of the stuff we're doing. And it was, I think that helped me personally release a lot of that, maybe a little guilt associated with it, or this feeling like, I just got more to do. I want to do more. It's like, well, I think entrepreneurs are always inclined to have that drive, we're kind of like that. Alex Charfin, who calls them evolutionary hunters. It's like we're the type that's just going out and get more. We can't really turn it off, but we got to give ourselves these bumpers or containers, and then focus on what are the key things that are going to actually move the thing to the results we're trying to get after.
Well, we did like an 80-20 analysis on like where is most of our time being spent right now, and we did an 80-20 analysis on what is the the 20% of actions that generate 80% of the results, and it was pretty impressive how there was not much of a correlation between time spent and the actions taken that generate the results.
Yeah, and I think that even just when I think about how I approach my email, which for most entrepreneurs is this just burden that they hate, but they know they need. So I have my director of details, Jess, who is reading through my email constantly. She stars the top level ones. So I go in and I know there's the 10 or 15 a day that I need to spend some time on, instead of the 200 some that come through. And then she texts me if a consulting client sends an email, if my attorney sends an email, if my kid's mom sends an email. So those are the ones that I don't want to miss ever. Like I want to know if my bookkeeper or accountant sends me an email, like she texts me right away and says, hey, cool. Greg just sent you an email. Okay, I'm going to go check that right now and not get sucked into email world. So, I mean, that's just a small example of setting those boundaries around my brain, because a lot of times we don't protect our brains when we know we have high level things coming up. And so, for example, like for this interview, I had some free time ahead of time. I do a solo show once a week that I added now. So we have 3 shows a week. And it's just a simple 10-minute question. Someone asks a question, I answer it. So it doesn't take a lot of brain space, but I chose not to do that, even though I had the time to. I chose to eat a sandwich and watch Peaky Blinders to just like allow myself to like have my brain be like free coming into this interview. Nice. So I protected it. I wasn't checking the news this morning. I didn't check any email because I don't want to come into an interview and have anything clouding up what I can think. And so that's the side of where I think entrepreneurs often miss it. We see books that are all strategy and they're like, here's how you do sprints and all that. Or we see mindfulness books that are all about being centered and being a guru. But the research actually shows that when you slow down, you have better clarity on what you need to spend your time on. And so if you're taking a Wednesday off and the weekend off, and you're genuinely setting boundaries around it and letting your brain be optimized, then when you actually get to the week, you can kill it. Whereas most people spend the whole week just charging through. They're checking email at night. So even then, when they're done, their brains are still scrambled going into bedtime. They then don't sleep as well. And then they barely refuel over the weekend because they have soccer practice in the yard and they don't eat well. They just want to escape and they drink too much. And then they feel hungover. Next thing you know, it's Monday morning and you wonder why, you really aren't that productive. And so actually, I would say the prequel to what we've been talking about is the whole idea of how do we slow down in a way that actually matches what our brain needs.
I like that because this is something we have no proof of the science, but maybe you do because this is more of your specialty, is like what your brain's doing subconsciously with all the stuff, like the to-do list, the never-ending things that we schedule for ourselves or calls that are coming up. It's all like the underlying things that we might not consciously be thinking of, like we got to do this, but like you said, our brains aren't turning off overnight. When we're going on a walk or when we're hanging out with our kids, like that thing's still going. So like, what do you know? I don't know if that's in the book or not, but like that's something subconsciously, I think when we start to cut some of that stuff off, like the actions take that Wednesday off for us, it's almost like everything else has chilled out. We've been able to just like,
Well, just like another example of what you're saying. So what we've had a tendency to do over the years with our business is we'd systematize, we'd hire team members, we'd cut things off of our plate, and then we go, we found more time. An opportunity would come along and we'd be like, we've got the time. Let's bring this opportunity onto our plate as well, right? Because we freed up all of this space to be able to do stuff like this. Next thing we know, we're involved in like 4 or 5 businesses. None of them are like super actively taking up our brain power, but subconsciously, we're now in problem-solving mode for 5 different businesses instead of 2 different businesses. So like this is what Joe was saying with like, we don't know the science behind this because we've never really studied it in that much depth. But what it feels like is just having less on your plate. Your subconscious is solving problems for only, 1 or 2 things as opposed to 5 things.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk about the science, but I think that a practical story would exemplify this. So we know from the science that our brains, when they're stressed out, when they're overwhelmed, even if it's all these businesses and it's not even actual time going into it, we know that you're going to default to what you already know. That doing new behaviors is harder when you're stressed out. So when I was in Nepal, I was in the Chitwan jungle with my friend Todd. And we were, kind of walking through the jungle, and our guide stops us. And there's also this Peace Corps volunteer. So she's there. And then this guy who had flown across the globe to declare his love for this Peace Corps volunteer, only to have her give him the cold shoulder. So it was like this awkward, hi, nice to meet you. This is super weird. So our guide says to us, if we get chased by a wild rhinoceros, climb a tree. Now, I didn't ask any follow-up questions like, can we practice climbing trees? Which trees should we climb? But he just kind of made this statement. It was like, yeah, I'm sure this won't happen. Well, within an hour, we saw a wild rhinoceros. It was before digital cameras. So I had a, film camera. I take a picture, like zip, zip, zip. And I'm like, I don't know if that turned out well. So I took a step forward. So I take another picture. Like, it could be blurry. I don't know. So I take another step forward. And this rhino charges our group. And I had been a sprinter in high school, and my friend Todd had been a long distance runner. So I knew for at least 200 yards, I was going to be ahead of Todd.
You're good. Yeah.
I didn't even think about climbing a tree. So I'm running through the jungle. Todd's running through the jungle. The Peace Corps volunteer and this dude are behind us. I'm like, there's 3 people as a buffer behind me.
Right.
So we finally stop and turn around and go back to where the rhino had been. Our guide is up a tree, like he said, and he comes down the tree and he yells at us. He's like, why go up tree? Why go up tree? And it's like, why didn't I run up a tree when I'm getting chased by a rhino? Like, I knew I could outrun Todd. I knew I could outrun the Peace Corps volunteer. I went with what I knew, not what was probably best for me. So the research shows that over and over and over, when we're stressed out, our brains just can't talk to the parts of our brains that are best for us to have new information. It always defaults to that, lizard brain. And so we don't realize how much stress is actually on us. But there's so many little things that can actually help. So there was a research study with the University of Illinois where they were looking at vigilance decrement. So vigilance, how well we pay attention to something, decrement meaning going down over time. And so until this study, the idea had been that, you get a cup of, brain power per day and you just pour it out throughout the day. At the end of the day, you go to sleep and it gets refilled. Vigilance decrement over time. And they wanted to see if that was true. So what they did is they brought in these college students and they gave them a 4-digit number. So say 4287. And so they said, when your number 4287 pops up on the screen, click this button. Any other numbers that come up, just ignore them. So super boring task. They're supposed to sit there for an hour, 4287, click. All these other numbers, they don't click. So they noticed that over that hour, what happened? Vigilance decrement. The amount they paid attention went down over time. So they missed the 4287. They were daydreaming, whatever. So they had a second group, as you do in research studies, where at the 1/3 mark, they interrupted the task. And they said, we put you on the wrong computer. Why don't you go hang out over in the lobby? We'll get you set up in the right spot. Just 1 minute. They didn't allow them to be on any screens or anything. They had some nature magazines in the lobby. So then these people come back, they do another 20 minutes. After that 20 minutes, they say, oh, sorry, you're in the wrong spot. Give them another 1 minute interrupted break. They found that there was no vigilance decrement within that period of time from that. So that means that there was no drop in how well they paid attention to a super boring task. So why is that? Well, when you think about a new environment, just from an evolutionary standpoint, you're walking down a new path in a jungle where there's rhinos and there's tigers and there's all sorts of things that can kill you. From an evolutionary standpoint, the people that didn't pay attention died. The people that did pay attention did not die. So say you've walked this path, even though you know that there's tigers and rhinos there for 20 years, and you saw one tiger 15 years ago, you're not going to be paying attention nearly as well as if it was the first time on this tiger path. So from our brain's perspective, in a new environment, if we can interrupt it, it pays attention better. So even if you're in the same environment, you're at a boring computer, you're working at your podcasting desk, whatever, if every 20 minutes or so, you even take a micro moment, a 1 minute break to just walk up and down the stairs, step outside, take a breath of fresh air, whatever you need to do that isn't on a screen, that can help you get more done in a short period of time because it allows your brain to be refreshed and pay attention better.
Interesting. So it's almost like the Pomodoro method or something, right? It's like, what was it, every 20 minutes and then 5 minutes off, I believe?
Yeah. And the research now is showing that you don't even need the full 5 minutes.
A minute.
It's 20 minutes and you take 1 minute can be enough.
Or even just using your Apple Watch where it tells you to like get up and walk around every whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and there's different layers too of tricking your brain to know that it's a different task. So for example, every Thursday when I was writing, I had a specific playlist on Spotify that I only listened to on Thursdays. I changed the lighting in my office where it was more dim. And, I even sat in a different chair, moved my chair to a different spot. So my brain every week knows, all right, it's writing mode. Let's do this. So then I got into that flow state quicker. Even when I'd go make lunch, I'd keep the headphones on. My girls knew, like, Daddy's in writing mode. Like, don't even talk to him. Like, I'll come say hi to you if I want to do that. Otherwise, like, I don't want to get out of this flow state. Yeah. And so then coming back into it, having the same lighting, the same music, all these things trick the brain to say, okay, right now, here's the task that has been assigned to this environment. And on those days, I never checked the news. I never checked email. If I saw texts from my assistant, I wouldn't even look at those till I had written for 2 or 3 hours. So I protected my brain like crazy on those days. And what was the result? Well, I wrote a whole book from April until the end of August, working a day and a half a week.
Wow.
And so it's just like, you can do crazy things when you optimize the brain in a way that really helps you kind of make it come alive in the way that you want it to.
Dude, and I think your book, if I remember correctly, and obviously it's not out yet, but I think at Amazon, isn't it like 272 pages or something like that?
Yeah, something like, let me see. I got it right here. Yeah,
that is very quick.
Yeah, I think you're close. Yeah, something like 244 is the version I have, but it's like, you never know what the edits and all the other stuff, what it'll end up being.
Yeah, Joe here saw a special edition that nobody else saw.
I mean, thank you, Joe.
If anybody would get the special edition, it'd be the Hustle and Flowchart guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Oh man, no, this is interesting. Crap, I had a question in my mind. Now it escaped me. But yeah, it's I was thinking about slowing down. You mentioned flow states, and you have sprint types. We talked about that, creating boundaries. Talk about slowing down. I mean, obviously you said protecting your mind and all that stuff, but to stay in flow. Like, are there other things? Because I know it's a big thing. Is slow down to basically focus more, speed up, I guess, the results. But what other things around slowing down could be helpful, maybe for people that are struggling?
Yeah, I think a practical example would be, so every summer I host an event called Slow Down School. So people fly into northern Michigan, we pick them up in a big yellow school bus, and it's just like we slow down, we drive 55 miles an hour instead of faster.
Do you sing songs on the bus drive over?
We don't. Usually because people had just met each other, they'd known each other online. It's just like this amped up like school bus. And, we even start with a 5-minute meditation in the bus. Just because it's like, you've traveled, you've hurried, you are here. Like, okay, let's separate out the travel from the beginning of your experience. And so, for then 2.5 days, we genuinely slow down. I say, don't take out your phones unless you're taking a picture, just turn them off. And so they know this ahead of time. So they have to set up systems so their business doesn't fall apart when they turn off their phone for 2 days. And we go for hikes, we get massages. I bring in a yoga teacher. We play spike ball on the beach. We day drink and skip stones. We genuinely slow down and just enjoy being with each other. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of that week, we dive into their businesses and we really walk through sprint types and how to optimize their brains. And the things that people have gotten done in those 20 minutes have been just insane. There was this one lady who was starting a consulting company. She named the consulting company bought the URL, sketched out her first 9 emails and her first product offering in 20 minutes. This other guy, he had been stuck on writing a book for a really long period of time. He's an amazing couples therapist. He has this unique model. He's taught hundreds of people, but he hadn't written a book about this model. And he'd been in a mastermind group with me. And it just like every time he'd say, I haven't worked on it. In 20 minutes, he sketched out the first 9 chapters of the book. So I think, when you start to do it, and these people I followed up with them, they were just like, Slow Down School changed my life because it was just the springboard into, okay, I've learned this method. It was 2 days of slowing down. That's a weekend.
Wow.
So if we think about what's it take to actually help you rejuvenate, there's only a handful of things that it really takes. I mean, decent eating, where our bodies are not full of crap and that it's fueled and that we don't feel too guilty about when we have cheat days. We want to hydrate quite a bit and not over caffeinate ourselves. Getting, enough sleep for your body. You see all sorts of different studies. Some say 7 hours, some say 8 hours, but looking at yourself, and you probably know if you're getting too little or too much sleep.
Listen to your body.
And quality sleep. Yeah. And quality sleep. I mean, if you're having a bunch of screen time right before bed, or you're drinking a lot to help you get to sleep, or whatever it is, that doesn't help your brain bounce back nearly as well as if you start to kind of move to kind of more natural ways of falling asleep. Yeah. Some level of moving your body, of exercise on a regular basis. We all can take small steps to even just walk a little bit more. I started doing a 1-minute plank back in February every day, and then that turned into a 2-minute and then a 3-minute, and the farthest I've pushed it is 4.5 minutes, which I don't know if I want to do that again. It's really hard. But it's like, can I take 1 minute a day to do a plank? Yes, I can take 1 minute a day, and to just find what is that small step in the right direction. So if you're trying to incorporate those things, not from a place of, I need to lose weight, or, I want muscle, or whatever, just our bodies, if they feel good, it's going to be a lot easier to slow down. And it's going to be a lot easier for us to then jump into our work week and decide what's our highest level of things that we want to work on.
Yeah, I like that. There was an anecdote from Matt Mullenweg, the creator of WordPress, right? He talked about how his workout strategy was, I just do 1 push-up a day. That's it. My goal is to do 1 push-up a day. Yeah. And this was, I think he was talking about it on a Tim Ferriss podcast episode or something. And he said that the trick is, if you just tell yourself you're going to do 1 push-up a day, 9 out of 10 times, you're not going to get down on the floor and just do 1 push-up. You're going to get down on the floor and go, well, I could do a few more. And then next thing you know, you get to a point where you're doing 100 push-ups a day, but you let yourself off the hook and only do 1 push-up a day. So if it's a Sunday, you're on the move, you got a lot of things going on, get your 1 push-up in and go. But most days you're going to do a heck of a lot more. And so just that little start momentum is is what you need there.
And I would imagine psychologically too, that's a consistency thing. Now you're proving it to yourself that you can do that, even on a shitty day, a day you're not feeling great, your body's feeling off or whatever. Yeah. It's kind of like with work, hey, the day is still going to show up, the 24 hours, you might have it engineered differently during your week, but yeah, at least building some consistency of the key things like that would probably be huge.
Yeah. I want to shift back to something you were saying a little while ago about the music you listen to. You'll listen to different music on to get into different flow states and basically a different environment based on what you want your brain to focus on. What advice do you have to people as far as the music goes? Because Joe and I, we actually had a guy named Angelo Cisco on the call recently, and it was actually one of the bigger topics we talked about is the music you listen to. He was talking about it from a masculine, feminine energy. Certain music has more of a masculine energy, that you want to listen to this kind of music if you're going to go into a sales call, or if you're going to go play a sport, you need to get pumped up. You want something with more of a masculine energy. And if you need to calm down, or you're going to go talk to your mother or your wife or your kids or something, you might want to listen to something that's a little bit more feminine, a little more calming. And so I'm curious if you have any sort of more specifics or details around the kind of music you listen to generate different types of states.
Yeah. So for me, when I'm writing, I don't typically like anything with words in it. And there's definitely a preference side to that, of certain types of music feels a little too meditative when I'm writing. And I do want to have a little bit of an amped upness, but not full on electronic dance music, And so I found a playlist I really like. I think it's called Writing for Focus or Music for Writing and Focus or something like that on Spotify. That's just a public one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, there's times when I want to get amped up, and some Rage Against the Machine and Beastie Boys are, at least every day. There's times that I'm rocking out to that.
For sure.
Some Fat Boy Slim.
Yeah.
But then I also have a playlist I made just for myself of songs that make me feel better. And it's just, I may hear a song on Sirius satellite radio and just throw that onto there. And then, songs will come and go from that list. My daughters have a playlist where they both have to vote to add a song to the list, and
Cool.
I think only one of them has to vote to take it off. And so they've got their own little fun playlist. I think music's such a personal thing that the big thing is, like, what do you want when you're working? Well, you want to be able to feel like you have some energy. So you want some music that for you personally gives you energy. You probably don't want too much music that you're going to start singing along to, because you're going to accidentally start typing lyrics instead of typing a blog post or whatever. But for me, I think it can set the mood. It can set the tone. If I'm listening to Rage Against the Machine, my girls know that I'm like either kind of amped up or like
get out of his way. He's about to
get out of your way. Yeah. Dad's moshing in the living room.
No, another topic that we talked about, I think, on one of our last calls, and I can't remember if we talked about it on your podcast or it was something we talked about on our podcast, but the concept of microdosing, is that something that you still do? Is that something that you're still a proponent of? And I'm curious if you talked about it in the book at all too.
Yeah, I didn't talk about it as much in the book. I did talk a little bit about just some of the research around it. For me, I wasn't seeing the results that I had expected, so I stopped. I still think that it's great for a lot of people. It's something that I think that I've seen so many personal friends get off of depression medication and have more creativity. But it's for something for me that I didn't feel a difference between. I tried it for a bit and then just felt like, it's not really doing a whole lot. So, but I think I hope that we continue to have support around research to actually look at things that aren't just pharmaceutically made. Yeah. These are substances that for thousands of years have helped humankind have breakthroughs in a lot of ways, have, changes in their thoughts in a lot of ways, whether it's microdosing or macrodosing, in, kind of guided psychedelic experiences. All those things I think have had their place in society for thousands of years. And so we're one of the first societies not to do that in kind of a respectful way towards those medicines.
Yeah, no, I think the key thing is respectful and having a place for it. Yeah, and an intention of where you're gonna use it as a tool. And
yeah.
And to that point, because that's perfect, is I want to ask about other tools, maybe like physical tools to keep focused, and really be happy with the days that you create for yourself, mainly in work, but also outside. Like, do you have any like headphone type things or any like tools that you just couldn't live without, or products, maybe software as well that we could share out here?
Yeah, I love my Bose noise canceling headphones. They're just like
quite nice.
I'm in my own world. I would say Sam Harris's his meditation waking up. That's totally worth the $100 or whatever a year you pay for that app. Every single day he has a 10-minute meditation that is just insane, and then he has a whole library of teachings, which similar to the plank thing, just 10 minutes of meditation a day can just help you like realize when crap hits the fan that I am not the crap that's hitting the fan. Like, it's not a personal reflection of me. And then I respond better to the crap hitting the fan. I respond better and I don't make things worse on myself. And so I would say that that's a tool. Honestly, the I Ching for me personally has been something that to learn more about Taoism. That's been the last 6 months or so. I've really dug into Taoism as a philosophy, the idea of going with the flow, that things are naturally unfolding, that if you're pushing too hard, that it's probably not right. While also realizing we all have goals, we all have ways that we do things. You don't just sit around and wait for things to manifest and come to you. Like, it's one thing to have a vision board and say, I want to work on that. It's another thing to put in the time to make those things happen. Yeah. But the I Ching for me, that's just been, and Lao Tzu's work has been so helpful. Other tools, I tend to be pretty simple in how I approach things. I think even when someone says, what automations do you use? We're constantly evaluating that. We're switching our email service provider right now. We're switching up, our membership community into kind of a different level. But I could say, here's what we use, but, for someone else, it may not fit them. I think it's more important to say, what's causing us stress? What's kind of bulking things up? What are we hearing from our audience? And how do we change that? Even just to reach into our membership community and say, hey, this is what we're looking at as an alternative to our Facebook group. does anyone want to help just look at these platforms because you're going to be a part of them? We had 15 people that helped us evaluate new systems that we didn't pay them a dime. They just wanted to help the community be better. And so I think just engaging your community is one of the best tools you can do because they're going to tell you what they love and hate.
Yeah. It's funny because we asked that same question of our group just last week and we got a lot of feedback. So that's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Well, there was, but it's sort of a diversion from some of the other stuff we've been talking about, which is more about the publishing process of the book. I'm kind of curious about how you got hooked up with HarperCollins. Did you do you have one of those stories where you pitched it to 100 people and they were the last one to take it, or like how did that all unfold for you?
Man, I have learned so much from this whole process. So every year I'll ask myself, and this is kind of from the book, The One Thing, like what's the one thing that if I achieve that, it would just level me up in an insane way. So, for 1 year, it was if I had, consulting clients that were twice my typical rate, that would be a game changer. Then it was mastermind groups. Then it was the membership community. So, if I had a membership community of 200 people paying at least $100 a month, like that's automated income. So every year I kind of say, well, what's that next big thing? And so it would have been in late 2017 going into 2018, said to myself, you know what, I really want to, is that right? No, the next year. Like if I had a traditionally published book, that would open different doors. And there's a lot of debate on traditional versus self-publishing, and that's a whole different discussion. But I knew I wanted traditional. And so every single author that I interviewed on the podcast, I said to them, I'm in the process of putting together a book proposal and I'm shopping for a new book agent. Would you introduce me to your agent? And by new agent, I meant I don't have one. I'm looking for a new one, but I didn't have one.
Not lying. Yeah.
And I thought if by, and this would have been like January of that would have been 19. January of 19, I was like, if I can get one by the summer, that'd be great. And within like a month, I had 5 different agents that I had talks with. And the guy, Greg, that I ended up working with, he's down in Austin. And I was going down there for a Front Row Dads retreat. So we met up in person to kind of vet each other. And it was awesome. And he was really, really well connected. So then I gave him the proposal that I had. And he said, we should probably work with a writing coach. I was like, oh, I thought I was super awesome, but I'm not. So then he connected me with Nancy. And so for a good year, from that like April to the next March, we worked on just my book proposal. And so those that don't know, you need to have usually about a 20-page book proposal that outlines chapter by chapter, pretty in depth, what you're going to cover. What are the comp titles? So if your book was on the shelf, what would be on the right and left side of this book? What's kind of that general category? What's your audience? Because ultimately publishers are buying your audience. And so what's your podcasting audience? Who's your inner circle that will be just like super fans? Who's your outer circle that'll buy a book or two? Who are other people you're connected to be on their podcasts? So you're kind of making a case that you have an audience to sell to. And that's what the whole proposal looks at. And then your agent, and it's so much easier if you have an agent, then your agent shops it around. And usually they take 2 to 4 weeks of shopping this thing around and trying to get as many interviews as possible. So then if you get an interview, that means that I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me, that they probably want the book. And so like McGraw-Hill and a few other publishers did meetings with me. They made offers. But then for me, HarperCollins was my top tier. That was my Harvard Business School, like stretch school. And I just knew because they published JLD recently. My friend Ali Casaza has a book coming out. My other friend Angie Morgan. It's so funny because we all got book contracts with HarperCollins at the same time and didn't even coordinate that. So there's this whole like posse of authors through it. And then the process, once you sign the contract, usually they pay you a third of the money when you sign, a third of it when you turn in the book, and a third of it when the book launches. I, the whole time, had the mindset of all that money I'm putting back into marketing because I already have my income. And so why keep that money? Someone else can just pay for the marketing of Joe Sanok's book. So I put all that money into a separate bank account, kept track of, who I'm spending it on, PR company, all of that. And so when you have that level of money that they've given you, you can hire these huge PR companies. And that's how, not with Pat Flynn or JLD, that was my own kind of trying to connect with them. But, to get on Bloomberg News, to, Forbes is doing a Q&A with me. Harvard Business Review just accepted one of my articles. And so, all these things that are going to come out around pub date that are even one of those would have been a game changer for Joe Sanok. And so to have the capital, to have a PR company actually do all that work for me. And then I also hired Interview Valet to get me on a bunch of podcasts. And, I'm sponsoring part of Podcast Movement and hosting a meetup with John Lee Dumas and like trying to just get out there as much as possible. And then, we'll see where it goes. That's the whole kind of Taoist thing of, I can try as hard as I want. I can say I'm doing the right things. And, it may not be a New York Times bestseller like I want it to be, but I know I'm putting in the work to at least position myself in the best way possible.
Yeah, this is going to do wonders for your brand, man. And do you have anything on the roadmap in the future after the book that you'd like to share, or things in mind that you're excited about?
We created joesanok.com as sort of like a me-centric website that's a little different from Practice the Practice. So, keynotes, writing more books. A lot of people will write a book and say that was the worst thing ever. I'm never doing that again. My experience was the complete opposite. I absolutely loved it. I loved going down the rabbit holes of I read this CIA paper for a whole afternoon one day, and it was recently declassified. And is there anything here? Because this is just cool. There was some of it made it in the book. Some crazy stuff that the CIA was doing from a research perspective that has actually informed society in a really interesting way. But being able to just go down those rabbit holes and, the Haymarket bombing in 1886. It was this big protest about the work schedule of people in the factories. And it was these 3 days of protests in early May. And, I just was going down this rabbit hole, and it became like a central story about how it's dangerous to push back on schedules in society. But then, 30 years later from that Haymarket bombing, we see that that's when Henry Ford decided to release his 40-hour work week. It made a difference. And these people were rising up and saying these conditions aren't okay. And they changed society for us. And Henry Ford did appropriately at that time, but we've outgrown that model. And so we're now that generation that we can push back and say the 4-day work week is the most we should be working. When you look at the Iceland study that just came out, when you look at Spain and Denmark and New Zealand, who are all testing out 4-day work weeks, Microsoft Japan did, Nissan brought me in to speak with them about it. It is changing. And I think in our generation, we'll genuinely see a shift to the 4-day work week be more the standard. But right now we're in the messy middle, and it's one of those things that it's going to shake itself out, but we get to help decide how it shakes out. Just like the Babylonians made up the 7-day week. We get to make this up.
Yep. We got a completely different technology and ways that we work. And the pandemic, coronavirus stuff has obviously changed it and maybe accelerated this whole thing. But
yeah, I was going to say the timing probably couldn't be better. Just kind of coming out of a pandemic where everybody just kind of got in the habit of, oh, I can have a career and be home with my family at the same time, right? There is this sort of global realization that happened over the last year and a half.
We're all wasting way too much time and going to places that we don't want to be.
If you just even think about how the industrialists thought of people, they thought about people as parts of a machine. How many of us, when we hire staff, think of people as parts of a machine? No, we never think that way. We see them as individuals that are evolving and changing and might want to level up in our company. It's more of an organism, an evolutionary model than this industrialist model. And so we have a couple of remnants that the industrialists gave us that are left over, like the 40-hour work week. The way we do schooling is very conveyor belt. There's a lot of things that are left over, but for the most part, we're 80% of the way there of saying goodbye to the industrialists. Now we just have to figure out, how do we do this, and how do we make the case for it and show if you kill 20% of the week, you're not going to kill 20% of your profits. If anything, the research is emerging saying people are more productive, they're doing better work, they're saving more money for the company.
Yeah, man. More motivation. I know it has been for us. It's kind of like a fresh day every day because we choose to engineer it this way. And I could see that happening a lot. I see on Reddit, actually, where, you'll see a bunch of news coming out, especially in the tech space. You have the coders and stuff like that, and they're typically would go into the office at this certain time. And they're but I like working at the times my brain's awake and, flowing and things like that. And everyone's different. Obviously, the roles are different as well. So it's really cool to see the shakeup from the industrial period, and that's not the cookie cutter way for everyone, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
no, for sure.
Dude.
Well, very cool. No, this has been an awesome interview. Hoping to probably have you back again when your next book is about to come out, if not sooner.
Sounds good.
So Thursday is the new Friday. How to work fewer hours and make more money and spend time doing what you want. I love it, man. So goes live again. It's October
5th. Yeah.
5th.
But you can
Got it.
pre-order right now as soon as,
Where's the best
at the
spot?
time of this recording. Wherever you get your books. So if that's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever, it's all the major spots. So
Cool.
your local bookstore, go in there and say, hey, I want 5 copies or 10 or
Very cool.
100.
Good idea.
While they're waiting for the book to come out, any other places you'd want them to check out, or any social media or website you want them to go pay attention to?
Yeah, so we have lots of blogs coming out about the 4-day work week and all sorts of things over at joesanok.com. That's where we have all of our updates. On Instagram, I don't want to have 2 separate Instagrams, so it's still just practice of the practice over there. But on Twitter, I'm Joe Sanok. I'm active on Clubhouse, so find me on Clubhouse too.
Nice.
Awesome.
I love that you're still rocking the Clubhouse. Most people have fallen off, but you're doing a good thing there, I know. So
Yeah, it's fun.
all right, brother. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much.
See you. That was a fun conversation.
That
with
was.
Mr. Sanok.
Yeah, we seem to be having a lot of similar themed conversations lately.
Yeah, actually, you're right. I was thinking that when we were chatting with him. I was like, we've had 2 or 3, maybe more recently.
Yeah, well, we
Similar
we had Joe, and before Joe, we had Angelo, and before, or actually, I forgot the order. I think actually before Joe was Elliot, right? And then before Elliot was Angelo.
Yeah.
Right? And all of them have kind of been in this place about like, let's like just chill out and get your mind straight, and
Let's get your mind straight, yeah, and then have your priorities in order, and have a system around it.
I would say it's actually probably more similar to the conversations we've been having without guests.
Yeah.
About having more fun and coming to the office and taking Wednesdays off, and a lot of those conversations we've had, better systematizing what we're doing. Like all of those are the conversations we've been having on our like no guest episodes. So it's kind of like you can sort of feel this consolidation of a theme among the Hustle and Flowchart brand going on here.
Hustle and Flowcharters, whatever name we dub y'all.
Yeah.
No, it's true, and I think it's been there must be a reason, Matt, that we're hearing all of this and we're talking about this. Right after, let's be honest here, we didn't record this intro or outro right after hitting stop with Joe.
No.
We just spent the last hour or whatever it was, you and I in our office here pacing back and forth, or at least I was, and chatting about from this podcast, this episode, and what we want to do with our brand and how we want to kind of getting a lot of clarity about what we stand for as well. Like, I feel like there's a lot of stripping of the baggage or the things that we thought were important in our business and life, because we're doing a lot of, we're working with Angelo at Alpha Hippie. So, we're kind of like deep diving on ourselves individually. And then Matt and I just always obviously chat about what our findings are. So then there's this blended thing. And then obviously you got the business side.
Yeah.
Which, we chat with folks like Joe here on the podcast. We chat with people like Angelo as well, and Elliot Rowe. And like all that stuff can translate into a really, productive and smart way you approach work.
Yeah, at the end of the day, what this podcast really is like a sort of manifestation of like our interests, right? It's like, this is the stuff that we're talking about. This is the stuff we're thinking about. For the longest time, I think we had this perception in our business that the sort of mechanisms, the tactics, the way we make money, the widgets, the cogs, all that kind of stuff was what was really, really important. But like, as we've kind of traveled down this path, and we both started to grow our families, and we both started to reprioritize what was like more important for us and where we wanted to be spending our time, we started to realize that it is less about tactics. It is less about like business strategies and putting in the hours and hustling and hustling.
Maybe hustle in sprints.
Yeah, hustle in sprints, right? Maybe. But we've had this sort of like evolution of ourselves of going, what's really important is like figuring out how to do the stuff we really want to do and let the business facilitate that. Not like, let's create a life where our business is the main thing, and when we get some free time, we go do cool shit with our family. Like, that's not what we're trying to create. What we're trying to create is like, we want to have fun experiences and enjoy the journey and do all the fun stuff more often than we're doing the work. So let's set up the work to facilitate the fun stuff, not the other way around.
Totally. Yeah. It's not when I have time. It's like, no, you're creating your own time.
Yeah.
Like I started rereading The Big Leap recently, and and I remember this is like, there's the the Newton way of time, and then you have the Einsteinian or whatever, Einsteinian, I don't know, Einstein's way of looking at time. And essentially then we talked about Parkinson's law, about like, whatever the amount you allot for that task is basically what it's going to take you. And Newton's law is or Newton time, I believe is kind of more like that. Like it's more placed on like, okay, well, I have this amount of hours, so this is what I'm going to do with this amount of hours. And it's like, well, the Einstein time is more like, okay, I have this action. Well, let's like, how fast can I get it done, or what's the amount of time I need to get this thing done? Yeah. And it's kind of flipping it to how we've seen our actions we take in our business. Yeah. And like where we choose to schedule stuff fun over the other stuff first. Yeah. No, it's true. And we did a podcast. I mean, by the time this one goes live, it was several weeks ago now, but it was basically like, here's the things we would have told our younger selves. And what I really found interesting about that podcast, you can go back and listen to it to get all the context, but was most of the stuff we would go back and tell our younger selves has nothing to do with how to grow the business or what tactics we'd use or how to make more money. Almost all of the stuff that you and I were riffing off of like, here's the advice I'd go back and give myself. It was all about figuring out how to find more time, systematize more, like stop stressing about business as much, enjoy the journey more. It was all that kind of stuff. Show up better, with a clear mind.
Right. And so you and I, back when we recorded that episode, we decided like the focus of the podcast, where we're going to take the direction of this show is we're making this podcast for our younger selves. And now we're even thinking of it in the context of we both have kids. So we're even making content that we want our kids to go back and consume and learn the lessons that were the biggest lessons for us. And because we've decided like, let's make this show like these are the things we wish we knew going back, right? Also, we're learning a lot of new stuff along the way of like better ways of thinking and reframes going forward, but that's kind of the flow. Yeah. And I feel like now the guests are sort of tapping into that energy as well, like energetically, getting real woo-woo here, but energetically, the people that are coming to us to be on our show seem to kind of fit that mold. They seem to fit that sort of way of thinking that we've adopted over the last 6 months or so. Yeah.
Well, I think you brought it up to me as I don't know what in reference to or like who it was, but like your purpose is something internal. Yeah. It's not external.
It was Ryan Berman. Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan. So we had him on the podcast, and then we've obviously Mr. Purpose himself, Angelo Cisco, has his whole way of breaking down what your purpose is. I don't think we really covered that. That's something he does in his training. So. Of like where you can really tap into your internal North Star, like what is that thing where you can get excited when you go to work or even play with your kids and family? Like there's it should all be in that inner fire, something inside. And for the longest time, or a long time, you and I were like, what's the North Star of our company? And this goes way back. Like this goes probably 8 years back. Yeah. We didn't start off by thinking this. We're just like, let's make some money. Yeah. I want freedom. I don't want to go to that freaking office anymore.
Yeah. That's how it started.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just like, hell no. But this, with finding our purpose and like really you and I, like the last, I'd say 4 months have been deep diving into this together more so. Done our individual stuff for a while, but it's now showing up in like this podcast and where we want to take this brand and some other things that we might put on our roadmap in terms of new content modalities we put out into the world. Yeah. And those are just hints for something that was discussed in this episode.
Yeah, there was a hint. The biggest hint was something we talked about in this episode that had to do with content. Yes. Putting that content into the world.
That thing. Yeah. But it's really cool because that's almost like a container, as is this podcast, of our purpose into the world. And, with this clarity of, hey, we just want to get some really cool insights and how to live way cooler or way happier lives and, make a lot more money, but just like enjoy the time throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like how many people do we know that are working in a sort of normal job that they always seem to just be kind of miserable and like not content about their life. Like I was telling a story about how one day I was kind of out and about more than normal, right? And it was a Friday, and like every building I walked into, people were going, "Happy Friday, Happy Friday," and I'm like, "Yeah."
This is the last time Matt saw sunlight. Yeah. This was about 4 months ago, right?
Something like that. Okay. Yeah. But everybody was going to Happy Friday, and like I was like saying Happy Friday back to them. but like I hadn't heard that term Happy Friday in like probably over a year. And I was just thinking to myself, man, like all of these people that are saying Happy Friday to me, like they're living for the weekend. They're sitting around going, yes, it's Friday. I finally get to live, you know? And like that day, for whatever reason, sticks out in my mind of like, I really love what we created because like, I'm not sitting around waiting for Friday. Like on Mondays, I'm like, hell yeah, I get to go to the office and do this today. On, Thursdays, the day we typically record podcast episodes, I'm like, hell yeah, I get to go talk to these people today. Yeah. The days we're not recording, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to the office and Joe's going to be there. We're going to get some freaking California burritos and we're going to brainstorm the business and like, hell yeah.
That's
like,
on the agenda today, my friends.
That's the rest of our day, actually. But like for me, every day kind of feels like a hell yeah. Saturdays roll around, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm watching movies with the family or we're going to the beach or whatever. Like every day's kind of become a hell yeah.
That's cool.
And I feel like when I was out and about and everybody was like, Happy Friday, yeah, the weekend.
I mean, that's their hell yeah, but is it really?
Yeah, but why can't every day be a hell yeah, right? And I feel like that has been the direction we've shifted a lot of our topics. And Joe Sanok, perfect example of like,
totally.
And he's somebody that we talk to
often.
We've known him for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. He's somebody that if we were to let it go, this would have been a 4-hour episode because like we could just go forever with
he even said he's like, I love to talk. Yeah. The reason why the boy has nearly 600 podcast episodes, at least under one show.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a piece of why we think this way, right? Just like conversations in the past with him are a piece of why we think the way we think.
Well, there's just interest outside of just business. And I think that's the best thing is you have, Molly Mahoney, we recently had her as an expert for PodHacker, our program tactical stuff over there, and she was talking about that. Like you got to have it's the social triangle, I think is what she was calling it, right? Yeah. Like the part of that is like you got to have these other things outside of business or whatever the main focus should be. Like when we met her, we were talking about families and kids and music and all this other crap. Yep. And like ever since then, now she's like, oh, you guys are like my brothers. Yeah. And it's like it's true. It's really cool. And but yeah, you got to have that. That's how like Joe Sanok is. Yeah. And those are good relationships and people that you're like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully people listening enjoy this sort of direction we're going in. We are still going to have some tactical episodes from time to time. We have a lot of tactician friends that we like to showcase, so they will be on from time to time. But
well, you know what? That comes back to us though, and we talked about this earlier. Is like us knowing our bigger purpose here, and it was very tactical before because I think that was the phase that we were mainly living in. Yeah, each of us in our own skill sets, but now it's shifted. It's still we do a lot of tactic stuff and we nerd out on that. Yeah. But we definitely lean way more to the bigger picture, how this strategy fits and, how it's designed and how other people are playing in it too. Yeah. Not just the two of us or individually. So like us with our questioning with our guests and the people we bring on, that's on us. Yeah, yeah. Because there's, anyone who has really smart tactics doing cool shit they got something dialed in upstairs, and systems and doing it differently. Yeah, yeah. So
and I also feel like this is a bigger topic, and we'll probably get into it in one of our Tuesday episodes. But I also feel like when it comes to tactics, we kind of found a better container for tactics, right? Like, so we've got Hustle and Flowchart, which is this YouTube channel and the podcast audio and the notes and that whole ecosystem, right? And then we've got PodHacker as well. And PodHacker to me feels like a better container to teach tactics, right? Because when we teach tactics on the podcast, we're like, here's YouTube ad strategies. Well, YouTube ad strategies for who? Are we talking to e-commerce brands? Are we talking to info marketers? Are we talking to consultants? Are we talking to agencies, right? Like all of those different business types have different tactics for like YouTube ads or Facebook ads or SEO or whatever. They're all going to be kind of slightly different tactics. So we have to speak in real generalities when we bring those type of people on Hustle and Flowchart. So you never really get into like, here's what this specific listener should have, right? Now, when you go look over on PodHacker, we know we're speaking to people with podcasts that are looking to grow their podcast. And we also know that probably 90% plus of those people are interview style podcasts, right? So like PodHacker, we have this real clear avatar of like, they are, somebody who is trying to grow a interview podcast, right? So now we can bring tacticians, interview them and say, all right, tactician, what is this tactic for podcasters? How do I use YouTube ads to grow my podcast? How do I use Facebook ads to grow my podcast? How do I use SEO to grow my podcast? Now it's a very specific person that we're speaking to with the tactical elements. Hustle and Flowchart, it's like we're speaking to such a broad audience. We have agency owners, SaaS owners, info products, physical store owners, lawyers, doctors. Like it's a pretty broad audience. So we have to kind of find those topics that really appeal to that broader audience, which in my mind is like, let's talk about how we're just enjoying the hell out of business all the time.
Yeah, and that appeals to any entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Anyone who has control of their own time. Yeah, and that's, I love it. Yeah, it's a perfect place for tactics to live as Pod Hacker.
Yep.
And a lot of our, there's always strategy, but then it gets into the tactics that are applicable to podcasters.
Yeah.
And like other people that want to do just really cool stuff with content.
And my brain is also wired to want to hear the tactics. If I hear somebody's got like this crazy strategy where they're tying Facebook ads to Twitter to their I don't know, Hulu account to growth hack their podcast, I'm going to be like, I need to know more about that now, But
Hulu is the piece I'm wondering,
I know, random,
sauce.
right? Yeah.
That's the secret sauce,
If we had somebody on the podcast that was growing their podcast through Hulu, you'd want to know more.
It's true. Yeah. Speaking of that, we got to figure out how to get our podcast unscribed. This is just a note for later on us, but I don't know how to do that, but I've been using Scribed a little bit, and I've noticed there's a lot of podcasts, and the interface is pretty cool. Yeah. It's very easy to find people on there, so we got to get on there.
Yeah,
Side note,
we could look that up.
Yeah,
we should go ahead and wrap this episode
up. Well, Leslie, we will.
Okay.
Of course, we will. We're wrapping this puppy up. So, Pod Hacker, though, just because we've been mentioning it, go check out Pod Hacker News. It's a weekly newsletter that we send out in the emails, and we basically compile our thoughts around like what we think are the best newest news or maybe strategies around podcasting and growth hacking and monetization. And it's free. Every Monday they get sent out. So if you go to podhacker.com/news, that's free. Sign up, and we give away cool prizes too if you want to like share it around to your other podcasting buddies. That'd be really rad. We'll hook you up.
Yep. Go join the Facebook group over at flowchartgroup.com. If you go join flowchartgroup.com, the group, within the next 2 weeks, you can get the action guide for free to this episode. So it's going to be all of the notes and all of our takeaways from this episode into a neat, concise action guide for you. You can get that by joining our group at flowchartgroup.com.
Flowchartgroup.com. Yeah.
And one last shout out here.
We're going to leave we're going to read a little review. It could be you, but yeah, shout out to our friends as the website's not loading now. Whoops. EasyWebinar.com. I think that's my problem, not theirs. But yeah, Easy Webinar are lovely sponsors of our podcast. I just can't pull up the points I wanted to read now on the website. So we're going to ad-lib.
Yes.
An ad.
Well, we normally ad-lib our ads anyway. So
we're pretty good at it.
Yeah, easywebinar.com/hustle. They're hooking you up with a discount, so make sure you remember that URL. But Easy Webinar, it does a lot of good stuff with webinars.
They do. Basically, it is. It's not basically. It is your all-in-one solution for everything webinars. If you are starting from scratch and don't know where to go, they got you covered. They got all the tech in there, the landing pages, all the mechanisms to build out the automations and all that webinar jazz. They're taking care of you.
When you say jazz, you have to do
jazz hands, fingers. Woo! Where's my kazoo? I have it in my backpack.
Yeah. We'll save it for the next Easy Webinar promotion.
There you go. You'll wait for that next one. This is why Casey gives us the big bucks for this
to play kazoo into a microphone.
He's like, this is driving away people from my business. Please stop. Well, but yes, if beginner, intermediate, advanced, they got you covered.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Please.
So if you've ever clicked on like a Facebook ad and then you see like a webinar and the webinar's like, hey, we're doing this webinar. When's the best time for you? Do you want to do it on Wednesday at 2 p.m. or Thursday at 4 p.m.? And it gives you the options to view the webinar when it's most convenient to you. That's what Easy Webinar does.
It does. It's so slick.
Yeah, it's slick. So if you ever wonder how to do that, easywebinar.com is the tool for you. easywebinar.com/hustle. You can get it at easywebinar.com. But if you go to easywebinar.com/hustle, you get it cheap.
You get a fat discount because Casey and his crew is hooking you up for listening to us ramble along.
Thank you for listening to us ramble. Let's read a review.
Because some people like us rambling.
Yeah, now we're gonna hear from you.
All right. Why is this so good?
I don't know.
Nika Carly posted 5 stars.
5 stars.
That is the requirement, but sometimes we let an occasional 4-star slip through. but the comment better be dang good. And
Yeah.
it better be starting with Joe and Matt.
And I
not
also
Matt
want to
and
know
Joe.
in that comment why we lost 1 star. So don't put 4 stars. This is an amazing podcast. I love it. I want to
hate-
know why I lost the 1 star.
Luckily, we don't have many of those, but yeah, of those, I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
Like that makes no sense. It's like the Amazon reviews. It's
Yeah.
like, wait, hold on. I'm looking for the criticism. Like I'm looking to buy this product or listen to this podcast. What is the critique here? There's no damn critique, but it's 4 stars. Why?
Yeah.
You're just a critical person.
And if it's just because you don't like our beards, well, then don't watch the YouTube version.
Exactly. This is why we record in audio only too. We have faces for podcasts, I guess, in your eyes. All right. So Nika, maybe it's Nika, Carly said or asked, "Why is this so good?" with an exclamation point as well.
Is it rhetorical or does she want an answer?
Let's see what her comment says first. And it says, "I love Matt and Joe. The way they create and share their genius is always right on time."
Oh, thank you.
Right on time. I like it. I would agree with that.
I agree.
Typically-
I agree that we're good.
And it's always right on time, right? If we're living in the flow, man.
Yeah.
Like we're on our journey.
Well, that's the
it's
thing.
on your journey too. You're here for a reason. Remember that.
Every episode that we record is right on time for us. I know that for a fact because
I'm sure it translates to you listening as well.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I love
All
that.
right. Yeah, it is. I
Got
love
another
that.
one?
All right. I got one more and then we're going to call it. All right.
Yeah.
So this one is from Trinsic and it says, "Subscribe, binge, take notes, take action."
or let us take the notes for you.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
just
even
throw
better.
that out
At
there.
flowchartgroup.com. You can get it for free. All right. 5 stars, of course. It was a requirement. We signed this with blood. Made sure that you would never, ever, or her, would, come on.
Yeah, we
you
get
know the rules.
We get it.
So the podcast is one of, if not the only show capable of bringing such high value across a variety of different business topics on a consistent basis. Clockwork, man, or like clockwork. Their conversations with the experts they bring on are more like casual master classes. That's right, jazz hands or sprinkle effects, glitter on a topic. Get your Evernote app ready when you hit play on this.
Oh, thank you. That's
But
really good.
again, flowchartgroup.com. We got you covered. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Evernote's cool, but why work harder? Come on.
Yeah. I mean, there might be some stuff
you,
that you
Trinsic.
want to take your own notes on for your own reference. So
Yeah, I guess so.
you-
But Sue does a damn dandy job.
damn dandy job.
Damn dandy job, all right? She does a hell of a job, Sue. Thank you. Intrinsic, thank you too. And I'm happy you stayed good to your oath of 5 stars only. We were watching you. We were watching you.
yes.
All right. Matt, what else? Let's get out of here. I want a Cali burrito like yesterday.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And
did
if you
yesterday.
enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. And please leave us a review. We will probably read your review on the episode. Yeah, I will crack my voice while reading your review next time we read reviews,
That's
just
what
for
we all
fun.
want. Yeah.
So leave us a review and we'll read it on the show because that's what we do. Until we start getting like 1 million reviews a day, then it might be harder. But if we're
We'll just
getting
read 'em
like
really fast.
a couple reviews a day, we'll keep reading them because we love you guys.
Because that's what we do.
Thank you.
Peace, love, and applesauce.
Bye. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Hustle and Flowchart podcast. Before taking the time to listen, we want to give you something a little bit special. Every single episode that we do, we actually have somebody on our team take notes. We basically have a Cliff's Notes version of every episode where you can go and find all of the tips and tactics that they laid out, all of the resources that they laid out, all the good stuff from this episode. We actually have a nice, simple notes version that you can find on our website. So go to evergreenprofits.com, find this episode that you just listened to, and give us your email address, and we'll send you the notes. Thanks for listening.